So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's JJPC meeting. Please be reminded that this meeting is being recorded and the chat feature is supposed to be disabled. It might work, but we will not be monitoring the chat. So I just wanted to put that out there because last time we said it was disabled and I think it still works. So it's technically disabled. For now, I would like to invite Jenny to do a roll call for us before we move on to our public comment.
All
Jenny?
right. And I did go in before the meeting to disable the chat, so hopefully it's really disabled this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Let's see, Commissioner Anderson. Chair Armstrong Romero.
I'm here.
Commissioner Davala. Commissioner Detman. Commissioner Geelan. Commissioner K. Williams. Commissioner Keast.
Hello, I'm here.
Commissioner Lebrecq.
I'm here.
Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Murphy. Judge Partridge.
I'm here for my first time and I'm hiding my face because I'm a little under the weather. So my photo there, I don't know if my photo is a good one or not, but it's better than what you would see if I turn the camera on.
All right. Well, we hope you feel better soon. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's see, Commissioner Rogers.
I'm here, thank you.
Commissioner Rojo. Oh, there he is, just joining us. And Commissioner Tassine.
Hello.
Hi there. So while we were doing roll call, Commissioner Davala, I do see you on with us. I now see Commissioner K. Williams is just joining us as well. And hi, let me take a look and see. It's okay. And I see Commissioner Detman has joined us as well. All right. So Kyla, when you are ready, we can go ahead and open up to public comment and then get started.
Oh, sorry. This is Commissioner Rojo too. I'm here.
Thank you so much, Pablo. I did see you pop on. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge that. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you to all of you for being here. And thank you, Judge Partridge, for joining us for your first meeting. Welcome. So glad to have you, and I hope you feel better. All right. Well, we will now open the floor for public comment, and I ask that testimony be kept to 2 minutes. And please note that there will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of this meeting. And during the session, the discussion is reserved for commission members only. So with that, I will sit in awkward silence until somebody comes off mute. If they would like to address the board, you'll have 2 minutes. Going once for public comment. Going twice. All right. Well, again, there will be another opportunity at the end of our meeting today. So our core objective today is to workshop and finalize the research questions for our September 2026 report. So finalizing these today allows the staff from CJC the necessary time to conduct the research over the coming months. So we sent out some research questions beforehand today, and I would like to just thank the CJC staff, also OYA's research team, who will be working together to make sure that we have all of the information that we have in order to present a great report to the legislature for September. So I would like to invite and introduce Kelly Officer from the Criminal Justice Commission, CJC, to help lead our workshop portion alongside me. So Kelly, are you here?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, Kelly.
Yeah, hi.
If you would not mind pulling up the presentation.
I'd be happy to.
I also want to introduce Mark Greenwald to the group, who we may call on for support. Mark is oversees research with OYA. So welcome to this group, Mark, and thank you. And thank you again, Kelly, for stepping in for Kelly Gwynn.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kelly Officer, Research Director at CJC. I'm going to be pulling up and down some PowerPoint slides throughout this meeting to go through the research questions. So if I'm not very good at it this first time, I'm going to have some more chances to get it right. And I will start with a big thank you to Kelly Gwynn, who did nearly all of the preparation work for this, and she cannot be here today, so I am stepping in to present, but this is really her good work, as you all know from working with her. Nope, that's not quite. You probably don't want to see that. You want to see this. Okay. Are folks seeing PowerPoint slides?
Yes, we are.
Excellent, right there. Okay, so I will go ahead and jump in, interrupt me with questions, and when we get to the discussion point, I'll pull these down for the discussion as well. So we'll start with the timeline. So the top of the slide here is going to be the next several meeting dates. So here we are today to finalize the research questions and get started on the content for the report. And I would frame this as soliciting feedback from commissioners on these research questions for today. Between now and the next meeting, we will be researching the questions and developing the outline for the report. In May, we'll provide a layout of the report and then continue to get feedback from commissioners on that. From there, we'll continue the research components. Some data we'll be able to access and present some data. Some will say this is in the works. Here's what we plan to do. Some might not have as much of the data component in terms of the areas of the report. And then June is where we will have the initial findings for feedback and recommendations. So that June meeting is a key one in terms of the first opportunity to provide feedback on the findings. From there, staff will continue the research portion and get a first draft put together for you all. And then at that July meeting, we will have a draft for you all to see and provide some feedback on. And that will be the last meeting before the report is due. And then staff will work to finalize that report by April 14th. To then provide to you all for any remaining comments. Now it'll be a little late for content changes at that point, but it will be a final draft for final thoughts and revisions at that point, all working towards that September 1 due date for the legislative report. So a reminder of where we're at in the timeline and kind of where we're working towards for that September component. Okay, next up we'll go into, there we go. Okay, just a brief reminder on the research question development that we're working towards today. So you all did see them ahead of time, but just a reminder here that we're going to be looking at research questions and getting your all's feedback on those. And just a reminder that we need these to be specific and measurable, and then also achievable and realistic. So ideally, one sentence with a clear objective. If it's a vague question, we're going to get a vague answer. So just as an example, we have this kind of question here outlined on the slide, right? How do reentry services impact youth in Oregon? A very important policy question. But then to describe the research question to help to get at that, we would ask something like, what is the relationship between number of reentry services received and referral rates for youth leaving OY facilities in Oregon? So we need to take that broad policy question and get it to a specific and measurable research question. Ideally, the data is available also to answer it, but we can get into some of that. And again, you all have large policy goals given the work that you do and the role you provide as commissioners, which is exactly what is needed. And so the ask for today is to take that perspective and then help us identify these specific research questions to build the content of the report, which then will provide useful information, again, coming back to those policy goals. Okay, so again, you all received this, but here's an outline of the topics for today. So we'll have a slide on each topic that identifies the research questions, and then get the feedback from you all and any potential discussion topics from there. But just to kind of lay the groundwork of where we're headed. Topic 1, detention length of stay and demographic breakdown. So we'll go through those in detail. Topic 2, the JDEP and YSEP graduation rates by facility with the demographic breakdowns. Topic 3, the transition services, as well as the demographic breakdowns. Topic 4, youth reentry readiness information. And then our 5th topic is the current legislation that outlines the educational requirements within the facility and also the coordination upon release. Okay, time for the core here. First topic, detention length of stay. So there are several, this in and of itself is a wide topic. So we have several research questions identified here that we think kind of puts into perspective the discussions of the prior meetings. And so again, kind of looking at detention, we wanted to focus on unique county youth, so not necessarily admissions, but unique county youth who are in detention for longer than 30 days. And then, we have these specific 4 questions around some of those detention length of stays. And then the last question here, maybe more of kind of a qualitative component to get at that. So for those that do remain longer than 30 days, what was the originating offense? Potentially pulling in some criminal history information as well to help provide that context there. Do we see differences of that originating offense for those that stay longer than 30 days compared to those that release prior to 30 days? Demographic group differences for those that stay longer than 30 days. And then demographic composition of those that remain longer than 30 days compared to those that release prior. So 4 pretty detailed questions, and then following up with the primary barriers information that, again, might be a little more qualitative in nature. So Chair, I'll pause here for questions or feedback. And actually I feel like I should pull the slides down at this point for some of the discussion, if that works.
And I do actually see your hand, Molly, but really quickly before I turn it over to 2 hands, I see Molly, Commissioner Rogers, and Commissioner Rojo. I believe your hand went down, Commissioner. Okay, it's back up. I just wanted to give a little bit of the guardrails. So thank you, Kelly, for helping to lead us in that. If you could maybe go back to the timeline, just so I can frame the timeline really quickly. So today we are finalizing the what and the why. And just as a reminder, we do not need an official vote on the questions that are proposed, but we do need a consensus so that our teams can start doing the work. So the findings from this research are going to lead to the formal recommendations that we must vote on in June, where a quorum is required, hopefully June, latest, no later than July. So we just need to really center ourselves on whether the questions that are proposed will give us the evidence that we need for the report that is produced in September. And I also wanted to center us back to some of the conversations that we've had over time for why, one, we picked reentry, and two, why we discussed including both county detention and OYA in the reentry research. And so just some of the conversations that we had. So back in January, we we established the research-based foundation for why detention and state facilities are linked in the reentry process. I know that CSG presented the reentry, that reentry begins at the initial placement decision, whether in secure detention or non-secure. We also discussed with Eliza Kaplan, our other TA provider, the Oregon statutory nuance that while OYA custody is administrative, detention and probation are handled by the courts. Both require coordinated reentry supports. We also discussed systemic barriers in January. Those meetings are posted and recorded. And then in February, we were fortunate to have JDEP and YSEP presentation from ODE, which really centered us on the JDEP information, kids who are staying in detention for longer, cycles of arrest, legal mandates, SB 1522. And then in March, we had a presentation from HEC where we explicitly addressed the gap where youth in detention were waiting and they lose that educational momentum. We discussed Pell Grant eligibility, continuity of progress. So one, why we're here today. Reentry, we agreed as a commission, starts at the first point of contact, detention, that there are mandates that impact transitional services for reentry, and there are fiscal impacts as well. And so I just wanted to orient us to why we are including detention and OYA. This was not something that solely focused on OYA reentry that the commission decided that they wanted to focus on. So with that, after setting that landscape, I will now turn it over to Molly Rogers. Commissioner Rogers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong, and clearly I think you've had some communication. I also want to center us that in, this is fine, but in December of 2025, our commission voted, actually Commissioner Rojos and Commissioner Murphy moved and seconded, and I just don't want to lose that. I think these capture it, except for one. And so and maybe it does, and maybe the measuring success is the one we're trying to go across all of the questions. But the questions were, when are youth ready to be reentered, and what does that look like at the community and state level? Supports and supervision, measuring success, and overall barriers identified. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose that, since we actually as a commission took a vote on that in December to do that. And then the other piece on this particular question, the 30-day piece, Kyra, I'd be interested in your perspective, since you and I both work in the statutes. The 30-day is an odd day for us because in Oregon statute, 28 days. And I know that seems a little odd, but the 28 days is the first good cause hearing for juvenile justice. And so I guess I would maybe potentially ask to look at, I know it's only 2 days, but it at least follows and reflects Oregon state statute. So those are my two comments. And I want the commission, I have one last, the commission to ground itself in that there's only 11 detention facilities across the state. And so detention is a unique, how detention is accessed, from the 11 detention facilities in the state, and then the 4 detention facilities that are accessed outside of the state of Oregon. So just as a nuance for the researchers.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. I see a couple other hands, and I know you had questions that needed to be answered, so maybe we can, okay. Commissioner Rojo.
Thank you, Chair. So I did have the same concern, and I just wanted to make the point about the 30 versus 28 days as Commissioner Rogers. So I'm glad that she brought that up. The only other, I guess, questions or clarifications that I would have on this topic, the first topic is, what demographic groups are we specifically looking at? Just because I don't want it to be so vague that our researchers are going after, because there can be a whole list of all these different types of demographic groups. So do we want to narrow it down on a specific type of demographic groups that we were sending them on the right mission to make sure we're, getting again, just in the interest of avoiding vagueness. So that was just one note that I had on there. And then, yeah, I think that was all I had, was just that the vagueness on that, and then the 28 versus 30 days. I had that concern too. So that was it on my part.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisa K. Williams.
Hi, thank you. 2 comments. One, I think that it would be helpful if we looked at 28 and 56 days to follow the statute, because I think and I'm wondering if 56 days is really the mark. If we can only look at, if we want to capture one particular date, I would advocate for 56 days, because I think youth have to waive the 56 days. The other thing that I would ask is that if there's a way to know how many of the youth who stay beyond 56 days, the court has stayed the proceedings under ORS 419C 378, which means there's a fitness to proceed issue, because I think it would be important to look at, it would be good to know that particular data point. And there's a whole, I think, as we talked about, somebody mentioned last time, there's another legislative group, that our work group, that's looking at this, the fitness to proceed statutes and where kids are while there's fitness to proceed issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Keast.
Thank you. I want to I think this is right, but I just want to clarify that we're talking about post-adjudication detention. Is that correct? We're not talking about, or are we talking about pre-adjudication and post-adjudication? So I think it would be useful to delineate between those two things so that we know whether we're talking about a pre-adjudication youth or a post-adjudication youth as well.
Got it. Thank you so much, Commissioner Keast. I think one thing that we did talk about was just reentry starting when the youth is detained, period, not specifying, not going into detail. But Commissioner
Thank you.
Rogers,
appreciate it.
No problem.
Sure, I super appreciate that question. And it would be, in Oregon statute, you're only allowed to be placed in detention post-adjudication for up to 8 days, unless there is a 30-day approved program through Youth Development Oregon, and then you can be placed in detention for 30 days. So post-adjudication detention in the state of Oregon is very limited.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Commissioner Lisa K. Williams, do you have your hand up again? Or...
Yeah, sorry,
Oh.
Just on those lines. So if we are talking about those 3 different categories of kids, I think it's important that we recognize those different, those kids are in very different legal statuses. Pre-adjudication detention, which should be 56 days, I think, if we can only do 1 day. Kids who are given a sanction of 8 days detention, and then kids who are in a 30-day assessment program. And the stay issue would only apply to kids who are in the pre-adjudication detention?
I think, and here I will ask to maybe Lifeline, Mark Greenwald from JJPC, in looking at the research question, topic 1, for the unique county youth who remained in detention for longer than 30 days, we have youth who are here much longer than 28 days, much longer than 30 days. And so how would that weigh into the research question? Like, would you need to delineate it by statute, or how, given the questions that came up, maybe both for Kelly Officer and for Mark Greenwald?
Paper, rock, scissors. Yeah. I think I would have to talk to CJC, but I think we would look at the different spreads and see the different ranges. We did a preliminary look at length of stay, and Kylo's right. There are some fairly lengthy lengths of stay, and there's more of those kids than I expected to see. And so I think it's possible to look at multiple groups, the shorter term stays, kids that are closer to that 56-day target. And then we can also look at the kids that are there for longer groups to see what patterns exist, and then report that back in the descriptives in the next step.
Mhm.
Does that sound fair, Kelly?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, that sounds great. And yes, I agree. Some of this is, what is going to be available, right, from a data query out of JJPC to help to answer these questions. And then possibly, additional exploration, right, if it's not clear from the data. So I appreciate the distinction of the 28 days and the 56 days. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's an easy exchange in terms of querying the information. And so recognizing those have kind of important legal status components is great. Kind of circling back to the demographic group information, again, I think it's going to be, what is in the data system. And the JJPC reports, I think, do have some standard reporting. And so, it may not be perfect, but I think it gives us a solid base to build from in terms of that component. And then again, to the extent that some of these kind of legal distinctions we can distinguish in the data is kind of to be determined. So in the next few months, we'll do our best at that. If it's something we don't have figured out by mid-August, then that detail can be in the report, right? To say, okay, here's how many kids are in longer than 28 days. We can't tell yet which ones are part of this, 30-day assessment program versus a pre-detention stay. And that, that's something we could all figure out as that comes along. So thank you all very much. And I think there's more discussion to be had here.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Mark. And I think, from just a commissioner standpoint, as soon there will be a new chair, I will be excited to dig into the fact that, and maybe this is unique, maybe Multnomah County is, I know that we are unique, but we have kids who have been here. For example, I'm looking at our roster. We have one who's here for 345 days, 173, 345, 338, 161, 299. So we have youth here for way longer than 30 days. And I would love to understand like their reentry outcomes when they've been here for 300 plus days. And I don't know if the other 10 facilities across the state have issues like that, but I'm very curious as a commissioner, what do those outcomes look like? So, I'm so sorry, Judge Partridge, I do see your hand up.
Yeah, I think I can provide some insight into that. In Marion County, those long detention stays are kids that are facing waiver process, because it is very unusual to resolve a waiver case in less than a year. And in most cases, those kids are held in detention until the waiver process is complete. So those large numbers that you're seeing are likely waiver cases.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judge Partridge, for that perspective. And I agree, and I understand that things like evaluations can take some time as well. And that's a whole other piece that I think weighs into this. I do think too, I know here in Multnomah County, we've tried to do a bit of a deep dive into the SB 1008 cases and those that have their petitions ultimately dismissed, or they plead to a different charge that is lesser than the SB 1008. And so that's an interesting aspect too, is those who end up lingering, but then don't, that the original charge is not the charge that they are kept on. And so it's an interesting piece. Okay. Commissioner Keys.
Thank you. Just following up on what you just said, Chair, one of the research questions from the sheet that we were provided is what the originating offense was. And it might be useful to know what the charge was versus what the adjudicated offense ended up being, so that we could account for that waiver followed by a plea kind of scenario.
That's a great point. Okay, maybe we can put the questions back on the screen. Commissioner Keelan.
I don't know whether this is in scope or not, but I'm also thinking about whether or not we can determine whether a child's in the custody of child welfare at the and their outcomes. I know, at least from research from other states, that being involved with child welfare can impact length of stay as well as kind of reentry support. So just thinking about whether that's something we could capture here.
I think that's a great point. Would we have access to the child welfare data as well? I don't know if in JJPC you would be able to easily tell. Go ahead, Mark.
I don't have a reliable marker that we can use. We do have the ability to work with our counterparts at DHS for some matching. I just don't know if it can happen as quickly as the timeline allows. There are, but I will follow up on that because we do share some information for the SOCAC committee where they're already doing some of that matching. And so we might be able to just piggytail off of that. So I'll follow up on that.
Great. Thank you so much. So it sounds like there's some tweaks to the first research question, but in general, it seems like what we're trying to get to is just identifying some of the systemic barriers to release and reentry. Is that fair to say? With the first research question, just kind of the tracking of identifying perhaps the systemic barriers for release and reentry, particularly at the county level.
Sorry, Chair. The only thing that I would add that I think Commissioner Rogers brought up earlier, just from what we had voted on previously, is just the measuring success part of that too. Somehow, and it looks like I see it incorporated in most of the other topics. But just if there's a way when we're talking about release from county, where are they released to? Are they enrolled back? You know, it probably is taken care of in the other questions, but just again, reminding that that is also a point that we're trying to make in these questions too.
Absolutely. So that research question 2 is the educational piece. 3 is the transition services. And that, to me, where there's the measuring success, that could fit into research question topic number 3. But do you all want to go through each question? How do you all best want to use this time now that we have Mark, we have Kelly, And again, it's not to debate the questions, it's the foundational theme that will help guide what we submit to the legislature. So, Commissioner Keith?
Thank you. I lost the unmute button there for a second. I just, for question 1, are we only looking at county facilities? Are we getting the same data for OIA as well? Because that's not clear to me from the way the question is written. It's just written as county youth.
It's a great question. Commissioner Tassine.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. Are we talking about research question topic number 3?
I believe we're still on 1, but I mean,
okay,
we have all of them, so we can.
Yeah. 1 seems to be, focused on county youth. And then there's other places and other research questions where it is both counties and OIA, but for detention. I just want to say, I think that this is a great question to be asking is, detention, who are the young people who are going in detention based on counties, and then disaggregating that data. I think that is a really rich thing to explore, and to help the counties understand how they're leveraging detention, and then also understanding the impacts of detention long term for our young people. So I know that's something that we did a lot of work on in Colorado.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you. And just Commissioner Keith, I think you brought up a great point, and Mark and Kelly, I'm really going to rely heavily upon you for this as well. What Commissioner Keith is asking is if we should also be focusing on, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Keith, if we should be focusing on OYA length of stay as well. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I see no reason why we couldn't look at those cases. OA is also going to use secure detention for cases. I think it tends to be on the shorter side, but there's no reason why we couldn't look at those patterns to show you what they look like, to see if there's any there that's worth following up on.
So dissecting that pre-adjudication, post-adjudication, probation stay, and then actual commitment.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, so separating out kids that are in detention who are under state supervision versus county.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Rogers?
Thank you, Chair. I just really have to caution us back. And I just have to put on my county hat as a county juvenile director from the smaller counties, and just really, we have not had our county partners present to us at all about the juvenile system on the front end. And I want to have and really be fair and talk to my colleagues about these questions so that they are not surprises to them. Some counties may not detain a youth for 3 or 4 years, and then have 2 or 3 youth who are detained. And I just really want to honor that we have to be thoughtful and careful with the small numbers in the small counties. And again, with it would almost, I'm feeling a slight disingenuity, I don't know what the word is, to my county colleagues of having this conversation as detention is a county funded. I don't disagree, and I do a ton of data on my detention, so please know that. But these are county funded programs, and if our research question lends itself to any mandates, I have to be careful with counties. And so again, I think we need to invite OJDDA to the conversation and what the juvenile justice system looks like on the front end, as we go down this pathway.
Commissioner Rogers, I appreciate that perspective. And as another county juvenile director who's appointed to this commission, I think that having the conversation with OJDDA, should there be recommendations that the commission votes on, I think that having OJDDA weigh in or presenting that to that association is absolutely important. And I think that we definitely, you and I, as the two county juvenile directors on this, appointed to this commission, should be responsible for that. I, at the same time, believe that as we are just trying to focus on what this commission should be looking at, seeking approval from a variety of different associations. I mean, that would include ODHS, because if we're looking at kids who are also who have crossover cases who are also impacted by DHS and perhaps the System of Care Advisory Committee, I think that we will get hampered down by presenting to all of the different subsidiary groups and committees who are focusing on key topics, and that would there in turn hamper the progress of this commission and what this commission was created to do. Now, I agree with you with the funded mandate, and perhaps since you talk about the youth who are, maybe there are counties that don't have youth who are detained for periods of time, then they wouldn't show up on this data, right? And so that maybe they don't have kids longer than 30 days. I know that from my detention facility, this is an issue that we are struggling with. And I believe we have a lot of unfunded mandates, and I would be a proponent to understand just the impact overall. This is not saying that I need to start staffing my detention facility a certain way, but it's having folks understand the depth of which our jurisdiction is impacted by kids who are here for longer than 30 days. But if we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. And maybe Multnomah County is an outlier, but from what I've heard from Judge Partridge is that maybe Marion County is impacted by this as well. So I think I hear you about OJDDA and other associations, and I think it will be great to invite them to speak as public members while we are figuring out our research questions. However, we have no recommendation that we are moving forward, and we are not voting on the research questions at this time. Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I didn't think about this in the prep session, but I think the research team is going to have some quantitative components where they can look at the data, length of stay, add in some risk data. But I think there's probably going to be a qualitative component where it'll be really important to work with the county directors, where we might be able to identify batches or groups of things, but we can't tell exactly what or why is something's happening. And so I think that's another place where OJDDA, the county folks, will be really important, is helping them understand, what that looks like.
I agree. Research question number 2.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will pull that up, and I'll just say thank you, commissioners, for the feedback thus far. It's been very helpful, and I feel like the format of pulling the slides up and down seems to be working okay. But if you want me to do it differently, let me know. Okay, topic number 2, looking at the JDIP, and I will say we have JDIP, but we also have YSEP, so you can just switch these in and out. So for this 2-year period, 2023 to 2025, what were the JDIP attendance rates broken out by county? Second question, we can do YSEP. And then what is the attendance rate broken out by demographic groups? And then similarly looking at those graduation rates, and also the demographic groups there.
Commissioner Tissine.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. These look like great measures. I will just acknowledge ours aren't going to look great. We're focusing on improving our efforts in this place. So although I'm not excited about what will be shown, excited to lean in.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisa K. Williams.
Hi, There are a lot of questions I would have about education, specifically about reentry. So I don't know if we're able to expand or if the commission would like to hear some of the questions that I would have that are more expansive. But regarding attendance specifically, I'm wondering about the hours of day of education that kids have access to with a qualified instructor. Because I feel like attendance is sometimes, did you go for the day or did you not go for the day? And so I don't know in terms of if the question is about accessing education, I have lots of questions about how is attendance monitored? What does that mean? And then regarding graduation rates, I think that's fine, but I have lots of other questions about credits and things like that. So I don't know if this is a very narrow issue, because if we were looking specifically at education and the things that we were talking about in terms of barriers to reentry, I think that there are lots of other questions that I would recommend the commission look at if it was able to, if we were going to really look at this. And I can tell you the ideas that I have. I'm sorry I didn't have time to send them out beforehand, if that's something the commission is open to. Is that yes?
I think I'm
Okay.
speaking from as one person, but I'm seeing a lot of head nods. I think it would be great for you to share.
Okay, so I think that in looking at education in facilities, I think that in terms of looking at reentry, starting with success, educational success in a facility, I think there's research that shows that that success helps kids when they get released in terms of their reentry. So I would want to know how many credits can a youth obtain during a school term. However, that's defined, and I know that's going to be very different in detention facilities versus youth correctional facilities, because of there are some times. The average or median number of credits obtained during the school term, like actual credits obtained. What percentage of youth may obtain the maximum number of credits possible? What percentage of kids enter the JDEP, or I'm not sure I'm getting the terms right. I'm going to use detention and OIA because those are detention facilities or OIA facilities with an IEP. How many kids enter with a 504 plan? How many kids are found initially eligible for an IEP in detention or a youth correctional facility? How many kids are found initially eligible for a 504 plan? And then we've already talked about the graduation rates, which I think is great. And then in terms of re-entry, I would want to know how quickly eligible students are enrolled upon release. I would really like that to be broken down by kids with a 504 plan, kids with an IEP, and kids without either of those. I would want to know how many eligible students enrolled in a comprehensive middle or high school versus how many percentage of eligible students enrolled in an alternative school. I'm saying eligible students because there are some kids who are being released from facilities who have graduated and aren't eligible for enrollment. I would want to know how long did it take student records to transfer from detention or OIA schools to the new school? And I would want to know the number of students who were denied enrollment because of the lack of records. I would like to know the number of credits that were earned in detention or OIA facilities were accepted by schools. That is a huge issue that our students are facing. They work very hard to earn credits and then they're not recognized upon re-entry. I would want to know how many schools have specific supports that assist eligible students to enroll following detention or OIA placement, and which of those supports most improve successful reentry, whether it's transportation, tutoring, counselors, transition coordinators, mentors. And then finally, I would like to know how many enrolled students remain enrolled 6 months and 12 months following release. And I do not know if all of that data is available, but those are my questions.
Sounds like a great dissertation, Lisa. Commissioner Tassim?
I just want to acknowledge, I love all those questions. I love digging in. I just don't know how far down we're going to be drilling in as we go through this project, and where do we start versus where do we finish. If we can capture all of that, I'd love to have all that information. I think those are the right questions to be asking, but I don't know where we're supposed to be starting. So if we can do all that, I'm all in.
Commissioner Keith?
Thank you. I think it might also be useful to look, at least for the OYA facilities, at like post high school credits, like vocational training, or because I think that sort of job prep can also be useful for a youth who like gets their GED and then doesn't get parole right away, so they have time to like do some sort of vocational programming or something like that. That could also be useful on reentry as well.
I agree. Mark and Kelly, do you want to weigh in as to perhaps feasibility of some or all of Commissioner K. Williams' questions?
I'll just say for most of the education questions, we're going to be meeting with our counterpart at DOE to find out what can be supported. I'm not sure all that would be available. I think some might be able to be examined. We just have to connect with our counterpart to find out what we could do. I can't answer one of the questions that came up, though, which was the prevalence of special education needs or history. And when I looked at it last year, it was almost half of the kids that hit OA. It was 47% had a current or documented history of special education needs. And the prevalence rate out in the wild is 15%. And so we're substantially higher than the average youth. So we can follow up on our ability to look at those. And then for the certificate, I think we might have some information related to certifications from Commissioner Keast. I know that's something our education specialist is working on, so we might be able to have some data around those vocational activities. We'll follow up.
One of the things that, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I guess I should raise my hand. I think you said Mark and Kelly, so I just jump in and raise my hand. But I want to say thank you to Mark for coordinating with DOE, and I'm sure you this has been discussed, but I'm envisioning getting the information that can be provided in the report goes into the report along with the plan for the follow-up from there, right? Whether it's just getting the data sharing agreement in place or the capacity to analyze the information or pulling in additional data components. So this may be phased a bit, right? In the way it's put into the actual report that is put together. And so thank you, Commissioner Kay, for a very great list. And I'm going to guess a portion of it can be pulled together in a shorter term, but then can create some longer term planning and working for those components. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And yeah, going back to what Commissioner Rogers initially brought up about the commission voting on the focus or the themes that we are looking at, which is the readiness, support, supervision, measuring success, and barriers. I think that most importantly with the educational outcomes are there disparities and is there momentum loss with educational funding, and also the credit transfer models that support youth returning to their community schools or being successful in the community with educational opportunities or post-education. One of the things that Heck brought up was the kids who are not aware of the Pell Grant, and I thought that was an interesting stat that was mentioned, that there's some funding that kids are not accessing who are impacted by the system. Is there anything else for this research question that should be included or discussed? Do we believe, is there consensus around this research question in addition to what Commissioner Lisa K. Williams mentioned? Commissioner Keys.
Thanks. I think perhaps the easiest or one way to approach this would be to treat IEP or 504 status as part of the demographic questions that we're asking. So in addition, in each of the questions, we're asking about race, gender, we could be asking about special education status. That would, I think that is, I don't know if in this report we want to sort of separate out education, but I think including it in as part of the demographics overlay of all the questions would be useful.
Does anyone disagree with that approach? First of all, is that feasible, Mark and Kelly?
I'm deferring to Kelly.
I think maybe that's one we'll have to do. I think we're going to have to do a little wrangling and come back at the next meeting for how that could be pulled together. And it will probably depend on the data source, right? So, if we're pulling stuff from Department of Education and they're able to right, create that breakout for us, great. But then when we go look at, the detention measures that are in JJPC, we can't just carry that over, right? So maybe with the detention measures, we are not able to pull that one through. So I think it may just be like a data connection question, and not as much a priority or policy component.
Thank you, Commissioner Detman.
Yeah, Brian Detman, Youth Development Oregon, for the record. Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Keast, and yet the sources question strikes me as potentially a challenge. And the same sort of overlay is relevant to the point Commissioner Gielan made earlier, right, around any crossover, right, and connection to child welfare. So to the extent that we can, that there will be a major challenge based on the fact that the sources of data are going to be from multiple departments or multiple agencies. But part of, I think, our both challenge and opportunity as a commission is to try to connect the dots, and that may happen in steps. And I just thought to myself, I think the vocational training piece, if I'm not mistaken, some of that is in the research question 5, if I'm not mistaken. So I agree that we should, perhaps this question is more focused on the sort of secondary education system, and then we have some higher education questions, and we have some training / vocation questions. To the extent that they are interconnected, great. But just as I was reading through them, I do appreciate that I'm super interested in anything we can learn about vocational kind of and training opportunities is for these young people. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Detman. Commissioner Keys.
Thanks. I absolutely appreciate and acknowledge that we may not have the data for some of these questions, at least not in the next 3 months. I fully accept that, which is why I wonder if having, sort of saving Commissioner K. Williams questions that are really significantly about education and need a lot of crossover for a subsequent report, I think might be really useful to just take the next session or a future session of this commission to really take a look at how does education function within the juvenile justice system, where we would have more time to sort of get a lot of this crossover data about special education needs and things like that. I think to the extent we have access to any of that quickly, that would be great. But to me, I don't know if it's something that we can really come up with quickly. I agree with that. Thank you, Commissioner Detman.
Yeah, the great thing is that several of us are appointed to this commission for a few more years. And so we have some time to really be more exhaustive and thorough as the commission starts to get its sea legs from under it. And we are such a new commission, and we're still trying to figure out kind of where we fit, especially with the other associations across the state who are doing so much work and gathering a lot of information already. And how do we lean into the work that's already being done, and where do we fit? I think we're still trying to figure that piece out, and I'm excited to see how the commission grows with that. And I think that this report is just the first step to getting there. Commissioner Rojo?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know I have a 2 o'clock, so I have to run. But this is a great discussion, and I will follow up later. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisa K. Williams? You're muted.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion about what data is available or not available, to the extent that it's possible, if it's not available, to know why it's not tracked. It's because interagency issues, all of that, because I think something this commission could recommend is that data start being tracked. And we can't make recommendation. We're required to be data driven. And so if there are gaps in the data, it would be good to know why, so then we could potentially make the appropriate recommendations for tracking data in the future.
1000%. I agree. Okay. Anything else on this research question? Moving on.
Okay, next topic coming up. Oh, there. I was going to say, you're going to see my email again. Nope, you're not. Okay, focusing on transition services now. So looking at county facilities and what transition services are provided, and the demographic distribution of youth that are participating in those services. And then same question for OYA facilities. And recognizing, again, some of this may be potentially qualitative in nature. Maybe it's not something that can just be kind of queried from the data system, but perhaps some survey work of folks, just in terms of what is provided. And again, exploring the data that is available. I think, Commissioner Lisa K's comments about recognizing data that is and is not available, I imagine will carry through here as well. But appreciate any feedback from commissioners on this third topic around transition services.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, here's another one. I do think that we need to look at it as far as days in, on detention on the front end, and break it down by the 28. I haven't looked at the data for a while, so please, often short detention turnaround stays of less than 3 to 5 days, versus 30 days or 28 days versus 56 days. I think those are all very different scenarios and opportunities for transition. I know we're going to capture some in the education work, but also here I think there's some timelines.
Anyone else? Please.
I also am interested in this particular one on re-entry into detention, since we're looking at that piece, is having operated and been part of a detention facility, and doing the work. I'm curious, I guess it comes back to, again, measuring success and maybe not having the answer to that yet, but how many youth re-enter detention in relation to transition services?
Do you mean, help me understand?
Yeah, I would be glad to help you understand. So for pre-adjudication, um, uh, facility or some youth get released on conditional releases for things like electronic monitoring or some conditions. How many of those transition services, I guess, not being strength-based, I'm so sorry, but how many of them fail? How many youth come back to a detention facility based on violations of conditional release?
So essentially, like, are there service gaps
Yes.
related to the supports that are put in place for youth who are released from
The community supports, yes.
And that, okay. Do you mean in terms of like recidivism or just?
Well, if we're looking at kids coming back into, if we're looking at detention and who's there and how long they are there, if young people circulate through 5 times for a conditional release violation, but they're only there 3 days each time, they're still there for a long period of time. So I don't know how we get to that particular piece, but looking at data, oftentimes I don't see a youth coming into detention just once. Oftentimes once they cross the threshold of detention, there's a high likelihood that they'll re-enter detention.
Yeah, and I guess would the question be, is that because of the service gap?
Yeah,
right?
That's the question. That's the question. I don't know. Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm following. Mark?
I was going to ask, and so it sounds like there's interest in looking at for kids that are getting alternatives to secure detention, so like EM or whatever might exist, to what extent are those alternatives seeming to work, or are the kids, exceeding that 10% target or threshold we have and coming back into the system? I think if that's tracked in JJPC, I think it's something that can be looked at. I just don't know the extent that EM and some of those things are tracked. We'll have to look at that.
I don't know either. I was trying to think about it for our folks. And then I think what would also be interesting, going back to Commissioner Rogers' point about rural versus metro or large versus small, is if youth are impacted who are re-entering from a rural county, if they have the same access to supports as one in a metro area, maybe, which I don't know how that would be, how you could determine that. But like one of the things that we struggle with is the length of time that kids stay on ankle monitor or electronic monitoring here in our jurisdiction. So I had a good example of a kid who was on electronic monitoring for 300 days. And we are required to go back to court every 30 days for review hearings for kids who are on electronic monitoring. And I would question quite a bit, like, why are we paying for this? Why do we have this kiddo on for so long? The youth was eventually taken off of electronic monitoring. He was on pretrial, pre-adjudication supervision for 2.5 years. And then he was sentenced to county probation for 36 months. And then, but at the time of his sentence to county probation, his ankle monitor was taken off. So, but now he's working, he's got a good job, and he was just promoted at his job, but we will have had him in the county for 5 years. And that's an interesting point just for one kid on ankle monitor for 300 days. And so the depth of which we track that, like, obviously JJPC is not going to tell you any of that. So that's hard. But it's also an interesting thing because I don't know, Molly, do you have kids on ankle monitor at all?
We do, and we do have them. And so for a long time, I did tracking of all detention admissions and conditional release for technical violations or conditional release violations for new crimes. And so that would be the count, that would be the qualitative piece to see if something failed on the outside, and then you'd have to dig in. But we do have kids on electronic monitoring. And the very rural counties have access to that as well. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but there is an interesting piece of young people who are pre-adjudication who fail on their conditional release from detention and return often. But that's my perception. I don't have the data because I don't do that deep dive like I used to.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of kids who are failing while they're on electronic monitoring. I mean, we did a deep dive over 5 years from January 1st of 2020 through February 1st of 2025. We had 251 kids that were SB 1008 crimes. And of that 251, 99 had their petitions ultimately dismissed, just completely dismissed. And then 29% of those kids recidivated, picked up a new charge in a year. And typically the charge that they picked up was unlawful use of a motor vehicle, not another significant serious charge. Well, not to say that's not serious, but another SB 1008 charge. So, Commissioner Keast.
Thanks. So the first research question talks about how many unique youths, which I was not sure what that meant when we went around that the first time. But to me, that sounds like youth who are not being returned on a PV or on a new offense. And so maybe we want to build those questions and that question into the first question too. Is like, what about non-unique youth who are re-entering detention on a PV or on a new offense, on a new petition, excuse me.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question.
Happy to. Topic 4, Chair. Yeah. Okay. So here, looking at the reentry readiness information, and again, kind of asking the two questions specifically for OIA in terms of reentry readiness, and then also for county facilities in regards to reentry readiness.
And this would be more of a qualitative question. Is that correct, Commissioner Tassine?
Sorry, please answer her question before I jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I would think so. And again, we'll work with Mark to see, what is available, but I think the majority would be more in kind of that qualitative space there.
So thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. Just one quick question. When we're talking about reentry readiness information, can you define that a little bit better for me? Like, is this gonna, like, I just need to have a better shape of it? Because for me, like, I'm thinking very broad, and there's a lot of categories that could fall into this. So I just want to have a better appreciation.
I will defer to Mark and Kelly, but there's an assessment tool too, right? That OIA uses for like readiness. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a transition readiness assessment that will be able to provide the data that shows the different data that we're collecting related to transition and transition readiness. I wasn't here for the original group question development, so I can't help too much with that.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
How you doing, Chair? Thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. So that was essentially my question. Are we looking for assessments that are driving structured decision making, or are we looking at hey, what is their transition plan? Where are they returning to in the community? What supports do they have in the community? What do they have a job lined up already? Like, so I just want to make sure I understand what readiness is measured by.
I can jump in. So my understanding, yeah, was somewhat from the assessment tool, which is my understanding that OIA and Multnomah County access that. And it sounds like it wouldn't be very hard to pull some aggregate information in terms of having that information ready to go. So that would be great, right? And that gives that assessment information. And then, yes, I think we can do the qualitative piece to all the other planning that needs to happen there. Some of it may just be kind of describing that process, right? Here's the planning that the coordinators are doing with youth. Now, granted, that might, look a little bit different in different places, but I think pulling that information together is it was my understanding of the ask there.
And I am sorry, Commissioner Tessina, is your hand still up, or are you?
I can wait my turn.
No, no worries. I was just wondering from the counties, if maybe Commissioner Detman or Commissioner Rogers, do you know if any counties use an assessment tool to measure like readiness or transition from detention or just into the county probation? No. I don't believe we are either. So that might be, at least you have the OYA tool that measures readiness, but then for the counties, that would largely be qualitative. And I think that would be a question maybe for OJDDA, perhaps the other juvenile county directors, as to how you measure transition into the community, what that looks like. Commissioner Tessine.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. Just my thinking on this one is that there's a lot behind this. I think that this is a good place for us to start. I anticipate that there's going to be additional research questions as we dig into this at each layer. So I think this is a fine place for us to start, but there's going to be a lot more that we're going to have to dig into.
Sure. Commissioner Rogers.
Yes, it'll be an interesting question with OJDDA because on detention, the presumption at each of the 10-day review is a presumption to release. And so you have to overcome that particular piece. So it would be an interesting question to see how they're preparing for the court hearings in that structure. And again, I think once we do the dive into question number 1, I think there'll be more research questions that may come out of transition for the detention side, but how youth are, the presumption of disposition versus release are slightly different. I do think for 30-day kids, I think it absolutely is an appropriate conversation.
Well, and I wonder too if they're in turn some of the human services conversation that we have, like, is it that youth can't go back home from, let's say, county detention, but there are no placements, like we have no placements here, and is that impacting their ability to transition? Like, what we really need here is independent living placements specifically that will help kids maybe not go back home but transition to live by themselves, and we're lacking that.
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. It's a barrier question for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barrier and funding. Any other thoughts on this question? Let's move on.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. We have made it to topic 5, which is not as much data-driven, more information gathering. So a review of the legislation requirements that outline education and training. within juvenile facilities. And then similarly, those requirements for the facilities to coordinate with educational institutions upon release. I think a couple of these have been touched on in the other topics. And so this would be more of that, again, kind of statute review around these particular criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Keast.
Thank you. I think it would be interesting to know also, at least for OIA purposes, if there are what administrative rules are in place, what OARs are in place for this kind of question as well. And then I don't know how ready this information would be, but I mean, counties might also have policies in place about this as well. And I think county policies or county rules could be useful to look into as well.
Okay. I think that just thinking about from the county detention, the JDEP numbers, the 1,300, over 1,300 unduplicated youth who passed through county detention. And any thoughts there around their requirements, or should there be requirements? I don't know. Because not all of them go to OYA. Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, again, I think this is a really interesting piece, and there's some differences in different states across the way on timelines from re-entry into education program after release from detention. And 198 unique or plus school districts in the state of Oregon, and having one of the detention facilities that serves over 56 of those of those school districts. I think this is an interesting policy conversation. So I don't know that I think it is qualitative at this moment in time versus quantitative, but really partnering in with our ODE partners to understand what it potentially could look like is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think too, if there's like systemic, I don't know if it's the right way to describe it, but like failure points perhaps that for kiddos, especially kids who are longer than 30 days in detention. With those, how does that look? Commissioner Williams.
Hi, I don't know if this would be possible, and I think starting with Oregon law is definitely the best place to start. But there are other states that have addressed similar issues or barriers in statute. And so I'm wondering if that is something that, as time allows, if that could be added, because I think there could be good information in other state statutes. And I also wonder about other populations. Oregon has addressed educational barriers to kids who are in foster care and the custody of DHS. And I think that one thing the commission might want to consider in the future is, should the protections that the state decided are important for kids in foster care, should those be extended to kids in the juvenile justice system? I think other two categories of protections regarding homeless youth and kids who have parents in the military. And those protections for that population, I think, have been really important in terms of credits, particularly for military kids, and then school enrollment for kids who are experiencing houselessness.
I agree, and that's maybe where I know that we still have some TA assistance. I can't recall, unfortunately, when there was the deep dive into all of those articles about other states, there's a lot of information, but if there's anything related to education, transition, and what it looked like, I think that there's another state, and Commissioner Tassine, you may know this as well, that there is like a navigator that is specifically an education-based statewide navigator that triggers support or financial aid for kids who are in the justice system, both detention and commitment. But there's like a legislatively mandated navigator, educational navigator position in some states, and I can't recall which. Do you know what has anybody heard of this, or am I making it up?
I've heard, thank you, Chair Armstrong Romero. Yeah, so I'm familiar with the navigator concept. I never got to see it in practice. I think I departed the front end of the juvenile justice system in Colorado before that was enacted, but I remember the conversations around that, of having a navigator who could help some of our young people who struggled with success in education. And so a lot of those were crossover youth who were in foster care, youth who were involved in the justice system. And then there were some grants that went out to different jurisdictions to support different initiatives to get that rolled out. But that's all I recall.
Yeah, there's specific funding. Commissioner Detman, maybe you know.
Well, yeah, Commissioner Brian Detman, Youth Development Oregon. Youth Development Oregon has funded some of these kinds of positions at the regional / local level in the past with some of our federal Title II, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention dollars. So, and there was at one point when I was working Chair Armstrong Romero at Multnomah County, there was some state dollars that were funding some navigators, support folks based in specific counties around specific kind of culturally responsive services. So yeah, I think historically in Oregon, we've seen some funding at the state level or federal funding that we've administered find its way to these kinds of roles at a regional or state level, often going through those education service districts that are providing education in facility. I don't know, Molly, you were on the council perhaps too when some of that was being supported or funded.
Commissioner Rogers?
Chair Armstrong Romero, correct. And actually transition specialist is a requirement of our JDEPs right now. There's a component that has to be about being a transition specialist, so it's part of ODE. I think what's interesting about it is I think there are other states that kind of mandate schools to take youth back in a certain period of day. And what I've heard from transition specialists, so again, this is qualitative, is that we have the transition specialists getting youth ready. It's the placement when they go. So when Commissioner K. Williams was talking about foster care youth, there's a mandate for home school districts to maintain the youth or keep the youth in child welfare in the home district. There's not those same protections on the youth side for youth coming out of detention. And so what I've heard from transition specialists at the different facilities is they can do all the work in the world, and they're faced with a suspension hearing or an expulsion hearing as soon as the young person gets back to their home school. So I appreciate the thoughts of looking at some of the other states, because I think there are states that have some of those similar protections for child welfare.
For sure. And I wonder too, during the presentation from HEC last month, they talked about the Open Doors Oregon, the direct admissions, the House Bill 2421. And Oregon law now requires HEC to notify eligible high school students of their admission eligibility. And this would include students in alternative education settings like detention. They would be proactively informed of college admission status. So it sounds like a navigator. I don't know who would be informing youth, but I think that would be interesting as a new law that impacts detention specifically, that if a kid has the moment they earn their diploma in detention, then they're eligible for higher education. And I don't know who reaches out to whom or what that looks like, but I think that would be a really interesting point. Does anybody have any more information on that, the Open Doors Oregon? That may be an interesting data point for this question. Is that new legislation that includes detention? With that, how will that look? Here. Okay. Any other thoughts on this last research question? So now that, since there are no more thoughts on this, on our 5 questions, that was great discussion for the last over an hour on the questions. I think it was really helpful. I want to open it up to any additional report recommendations. So any recommendations for the report that are not tied to research questions or findings. Maybe somebody mentioned OCID at one point, and if there's any intersectional research that we want to invite for child welfare specifically. Foster care statute, House Bill 3075 from 2005, SB 20 from 2017, as starting points for developing a statute related to juvenile justice and education is something that we've talked about in the past. Anything additional that we want to see in our legislative report in September 2026? Do we feel like from this conversation that we had, the holistic conversation, that we feel confident and comfortable with Mark, Kelly, the CJC team moving forward to try to create some recommendations for this committee? Commissioner Rogers, if you're talking to us, we can't hear you. Oh, okay. Okay. Hearing none. This is the starting point, CJC team. And Mark, do you have any questions for the commission to help begin with developing recommendations related to the discussion that we had today?
Nothing additional that's come up today. To get started, I have no doubt we'll have some follow-ups.
Chair, I'll just chime in. I agree with Mark, and I'm going to thank him in advance for his assistance on this work.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you for your work and your time on this. I know that Mark, you mentioned going to this JJPC steering committee as well and making sure that we are on the right track again with county data. So thank you for that, making sure that we have the right steps in place to gather the data that you need to move forward. So Commissioner Rogers, who chairs the JJPC steering committee, you will be hearing probably from folks related to this topic soon. So I appreciate the work that you all do. So the last point of business that I have today is that our next meeting is May 22nd. And I would like to propose that we meet on the 5th Friday instead of the 4th Friday of May, given that the 4th Friday is the Friday before Memorial Day. And I assume several folks may or may not be available. And so just to try to safeguard that date, I'm asking that we meet on May 29th. Does anyone oppose that date?
Chair Armstrong Romero, I don't oppose the date by any means. I think that there'll be a couple of commission members that will be gone, but by all means, don't hang up on Commissioner Detman and I will both be at CJJ.
On May 29th?
Yep.
May 29th for everyone else, does that works?
I can make either work, Chair.
The other
Both are
option,
fine for me. Yeah, both are fine for me.
okay. The other option is also May 15th.
May 15th is a no-go for me.
Okay, so then May 29th. May 29th. Okay, so we'll make sure that date gets sent out soon. And the next in-person meeting that we do have is in June. And that will be at the Jackie Winters site on June.
I believe it's 26th.
26th. Yep. And that will also be your first meeting with the new chair. Yay. On June 26th. And I have no updates for you on who will be selected as the chair. So, although our next meeting is in person, or I'm sorry, the June meeting is in person, I really want to emphasize strongly attendance at that June 26th meeting because we have a very tight timeline where we have to actually vote. And I really hope that we have quorum in June because we have to get this report into the legislature by September. So I just want to emphasize attendance there. Can we, before we adjourn, can we pull back up the timeline real quick for that report?
Yes, Chair. We had it. So here again is a reminder on the timeline, and we've got the box around today.
Great. So for the next month, the team will begin researching questions and taking into consideration the conversation that we had today. They'll develop an outline of the report. That layout and outline will be presented to the commissioners by May 29th. And then CJC staff will continue their quest on information. And then by June 26th, the initial findings will be presented for feedback and recommendations and a vote. And then CJC staff will finalize their findings. By July 24th, we will have a draft of the report presented, again, feedback, and we will, CJC staff will incorporate that feedback into the final report. The final report will be finalized by August 14th. By then, our commission will be provided the final draft of the report for any remaining feedback. And on September 1st, CJC will be submitting that report to the legislature. Are there any questions on this timeline, apart from the adjustment of May 29th? Do we believe that we need to have should we have any additional meetings in the month of June or July or August? Does the commission believe that we need a meeting between June 26th and July 24th? Yeah, I'd like Commissioner Keast.
Sorry, I raised my hand and started talking at the same time. I will have a better sense of that after the May meeting, I think. So it's possible, but I'm not sure right now.
Great. That makes sense. Okay, so we'll put a pin in that question. Any other questions or thoughts on this timeline? Very nice. All right, if there is nothing else, then I will take the last few minutes and invite the public to comment before we conclude. Are there any members of the public who'd like to address the commissioners? Okay, very nice. I do want to remind the commissioners that our meetings are on Fridays. I know that in the summer, Friday afternoons may not be the most appealing, but I just want to flag that June 26th is a Friday and we're in person. So if there's a need to change that for July, just keep that in your mind. Okay. All right, I want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to Mark Greenwald and Kelly Officer today for your work, your help, and of course, Kelly Gwynn. Thank you all. And with that, it's 2:42. I will give you 18 minutes of your life. Have a great day.
Take care, y'all. Thank you, Kyla.
Bye.